pause this video right now. Go down to the comments and type your full last name. Seriously, do it now, because there's a 70% chance that the name you carry isn't actually yours. Over the next 8 minutes, I'm going to show you how the United States government executed the largest identity theft in history, and how your last name might be living evidence of a crime that started over 120 years ago. I'm talking about the Black Indian Registry, a system that turned entire families into ghosts. And if you have ancestors from the South, especially Oklahoma, North Carolina, or Virginia, you need to hear this. This isn't some distant historical footnote. This is active. This is now. There are people alive today who remember their grandparents being told to hide their native heritage, to straighten their hair, to never speak the language, to forget the old ways, all because a piece of paper said they were the wrong kind of Indian. The official story they taught you is simple. Africans were enslaved, natives were removed. End of story. Two parallel tragedies that never touched. But here's the problem. They weren't parallel. Between 1650 and 1900, hundreds of thousands of people lived in what historians now call the invisible space, communities where Black and Native bloodlines merged so completely that the government couldn't control them. These weren't just random encounters. We're talking about the Black Seminoles in Florida, who fought 3 wars against the U.S. Army. These weren't just allies, they were family, brothers-in-law fighting side by side, cousins sharing the same campfire, children who grew up speaking Muskogee and carrying African names. Maroon societies hidden in the Great Dismal Swamp, where Africans and natives built entire towns that lasted for decades. Towns with their own governments, their own trade networks, their own culture that blended drumming traditions with tribal ceremonies. And families in the Carolinas who carried both Cherokee blood and African ancestry. People who hunted with bows, spoke indigenous languages, and practiced both African spiritual traditions and native ceremonies. These communities were thriving, they were powerful, and that's exactly why they had to be destroyed. And then came 1898, the year everything changed. The Dawes Commission rolled into Indian territory with one mission: create a registry, put everyone in boxes, decide who gets land, decide who gets citizenship, decide who gets to keep their identity. But here's what they don't teach you. The registry was designed to fail certain people. If you had dark skin, even if your grandmother was full-blood Cherokee, even if you spoke the language fluently, even if you lived on tribal land your entire life, even if you participated in tribal ceremonies and knew every elder by name, you got a different card, a freedman's card. And that card meant one thing: you weren't Indian anymore. Overnight, thousands of families lost everything, not just land, not just citizenship. Their entire identity was legally erased. Now let me show you the evidence they tried to bury, and I mean literally bury. Some of these documents were hidden in archives for over a century. Exhibit A, the surname trick. Look at the 1880 census for Creek Nation territory. You'll find families with names like Freeman, Butler, and Washington listed as Indian. Same families, same addresses, same land, same children. Now jump to the 1900 census. Same names, same land, same people living in the same houses, but now listed as Negro or mulatto. What changed? Not the families, not their blood, not their way of life, just a bureaucrat's pen. One stroke of ink and generations of identity disappeared. I want you to understand how deliberate this was. Census takers were given explicit instructions. If someone has dark skin, mark them as colored, regardless of what they tell you about their heritage, regardless of the language they speak, regardless of how they live. Exhibit B, the $5 Indian. While black Indians were being systematically kicked off the rolls, stripped of their land rights, and told they weren't native enough, white settlers were literally buying their way in. Pay a commissioner $5, that's it, just $5, get listed as Cherokee by blood, and claim 160 acres of prime tribal land. This wasn't happening in the shadows. This wasn't some conspiracy theory. This was policy, documented, receipted, legalized theft with a paper trail. There are records of white families who had never set foot in Indian territory, who couldn't name a single Cherokee ancestor, who didn't speak a word of any native language, getting enrolled while families who lived tribally for generations were denied. The message was clear. Indian identity wasn't about blood or culture. It was about money and skin color. Exhibit C, the Virginia Genocide. In 1924, a man named Walter Plecker became the registrar of Virginia's Bureau of Vital Statistics, and he had one mission: racial purity. He created the Racial Integrity Act. His job? Erase every mixed-race identity in Virginia. If you had one drop of African blood, you were colored. Period. End of discussion. Thousands of Monacan, Pamunkey, and Mattapony families who'd lived as Native Americans for 300 years, families with documented tribal histories going back to Pocahontas, woke up one morning and were legally black. Their birth certificates were altered, their marriage licenses were voided, their children's school records were changed, family Bibles were confiscated if they showed Native ancestry. One man, one law, thousands of identities stolen with a stroke of a pen. Walter Plecker personally wrote letters to local registrars, ordering them to change racial classifications. He kept lists of suspicious surnames, families he believed were trying to pass as white or Indian when they had African blood. He destroyed families, he destroyed communities, and he did it all legally. But here's what Walter Plecker didn't count on. Names remember what papers forget. If your last name is Goins, Bunch, Collins, or Gibson in the Carolinas, you're almost certainly descendant from the Lumbee or Melungeon communities, groups that mixed African, Native, and European blood so thoroughly that the government gave up trying to classify them. They just created a new category: other. If you're a Johnson, a Caesar, or a Bowlegs from Oklahoma, there's a strong chance you descend from black Seminoles who fought alongside Osceola in the Seminole Wars. If your family name is Brunner, Grayson, or Perryman from the Creek Nation, your ancestors might have been on both the blood roll and the freedman's roll, depending on which year the census taker came by. Your name is a receipt, a paper trail they couldn't completely erase, because while they could change the documents, they couldn't go back and change every family story, every surname, every genetic marker that proves the truth. So why don't we learn about this in school? Why isn't this common knowledge? Why do people laugh when someone says they have Native American ancestry? Because admitting this truth breaks 3 comfortable lies that American society is built on. Lie number 1. Slavery was a black and white issue. It wasn't. The story is far more complicated. Yes, some native tribes enslaved Africans. That's a documented fact we can't ignore. The Cherokee, Chickasaw, Choctaw, Creek, and Seminole nations all practiced slavery, adopting it from European colonizers. But at the same time, Africans were marrying into tribes. They were being adopted as full tribal members. They were fighting in tribal wars, not as slaves, but as warriors. Children were being born who carried both bloodlines and both cultures. The story is messy, complicated, and doesn't fit into a textbook chapter, so they simplified it. They erased the complexity. Lie number 2. Native Americans disappeared after the Trail of Tears. They didn't. They didn't vanish. They didn't go extinct. They just stopped being counted as native if they had the wrong skin tone. Think about that. The same government that forced tribes to walk the Trail of Tears, that killed thousands through forced relocation, then turned around and told the survivors, "You're too black to be Indian anymore."
It's genocide by paperwork, and it worked because most people don't look at old census records. Lie number 3, race is biological. It's not. It's bureaucratic. It's political. It's about power. Your race on paper depended on who filled out the form, what year it was, what the government needed you to be, and frankly, what the census taker felt like writing down that day. I've seen families where the father is listed as Indian, the mother as Negro, and the children as mulatto, all on the same form, all on the same form. The inconsistency is the proof. The Dawes rolls weren't about heritage. They were about land theft, pure and simple. By 1907, when Oklahoma became a state, over 90 million acres of tribal land had been
legally transferred to white settlers. Let me repeat that. 90 million acres. That's an area larger than the entire state of New Mexico. The freedmen exclusion was part of that plan. Make people too black to be Indian. Make them too Indian to get reparations. Trap them in the middle with no rights to either identity. Take everything. And it worked. For over 100 years, it worked. Until now. Until DNA tests started telling a different story than the papers. Until families started comparing their grandmother's stories to the census and saying, wait, this doesn't match. Until people like you started asking, wait, why does our family look like that if we're supposedly just one thing? Why do we have these traditions? Why do we have these stories? Why does this old photo show something that documents deny?